have a wrap-up talk for you. Over the past few nights, we've talked about some concepts, the 3 marks of existence, the 3 poisons, their antidotes. And as I said on the first night, the point is just hopefully to inspire or encourage, to offer a practitioner something that feels like it feeds or fuels their practice, so that there's some excitement, interest, making connections. That's all that's really for. So I hope some of that has happened, but it's not intellectual. It's not about memorizing these things or learning them or understanding them in the usual way. When it comes to practice and reading spiritual books and listening to talks, it's about, and even in your practice, it's about listening with how you feel. Watching for something that hits differently, that grabs your attention. So we do have a few people here who have just done their first multi-day meditation retreat, like almost a week. So we have to talk about a few things. So where do we go from here? Everybody's worked really hard. It's really important that you know that things might be different when you go home. They may not be, but they probably will be. Probably be a little different. And that can go in any direction. There can be like a sensory sharpness. Everything might seem really vibrant and rich at times. There could be a joy and an ease. And that will pass. And then same thing on the other hand, for some people, there can be some sense of overwhelm, overstimulation, kind of disorientation that can sometimes even be unsettling or have a tinge of something that feels frightening, and that too will pass. So these are just, a result of being open. It's hard to tell when you're here in this quiet environment and there's a lot of structure and a lot of silence. It's hard to tell how much you've really opened. And so then getting back into the world, sometimes it can be like, wow, this is amazing. And then sometimes it can be, oh my God, this is so horrible. But it's, it's just this openness, so you can breathe, relax, try not to tighten up and close up too much, but just leave your hands open to what seems positive, leave your hands open to what seems not positive. And definitely, if anything seems unmanageable, just text me and we'll have a conversation, and that can smooth it out much, much faster. And I know that from experience, having gone through that a lot myself. I was just thinking today, it's kind of like if you go to a restaurant and you have some kind of flambe dish and they pour a bunch of alcohol on it and set it on fire. And so it's, then the fire goes out. You don't eat it while it's on fire. And then you're left with your dish. Then you'll have your dish. So, maybe a few days, maybe a week after the fire goes out, then you'll have your dish. And you'll know what you're left with. So that's a thing that could happen. Do make notes. You may have insights. You may notice some things that are different and wonder and, doubt yourself or not sure. And these, little gifts that you get after an intensive practice period, you're more likely to be able to hold on to the ones that you feel like are valuable, that could be new habits, if you spend a little time with them, like reflect, at least write it down, make a note, send me an email or something. Better to do that than to just wave it off and then it may not stay. So then, how to go on with practice, what to do after this. I two main kinds of categories come to mind. One is practice and the other is tools. And there's really just one thing I want to say about practice, which is pay attention. And the one thing I want to say about tools is noble company. And I'll expand on that a little bit. So paying attention. So when sitting, I'm just, we have a few people who are newer, so I want to be really, really thorough. When sitting, notice your sensations most of all. This is your key to being present. This is why breath practice is so well known and still continued after millennia, because it's happening right now. It's not ideas. When not sitting, connect clearly and often with your surroundings. Whenever you remember that you have a practice, just notice something that you hear in real time. In that last sit, we had a lot of helicopters, right? You might hear helicopters, owls, depending on where you live, pets. You can see what you see outside in your room. You can feel yourself moving. You can feel the vibration of your steering wheel if you're driving. You can feel your reactions when you're interacting with other people. And slow down. It's so helpful whenever you can. There's a lot of times you can't, but there are maybe more times that we can than we really realize most of the time. We can slow down a little bit just to pay attention. Can almost always be more present in a way. I mean, we're always moving through the present, so yes, on that sense, you're here, you're present, but there's an experience available of meeting a moment without concepts. And that's what we're going towards. Any kind of slowing down. Just to consider, what you're going to do next. We've probably all had the experience of trying to remember whether you've brushed your teeth or taken your medicine. It's like, well, should I do it again? I mean, gosh, just last fall I overdosed on ibuprofen because I forgot I took it. Super unpleasant. Don't recommend. Slow down. When you slow down, you are so likely to see more interconnectedness, like we were talking about last night. The way what I do next matters. It matters on the whole, not just for myself. Noticing if, what my aversions are to that. Oh, if you slow down just enough, you might even see this quick succession of, maybe I don't really want to slow down because then I might have to do this other thing and I'm tired and I don't want to. And there's a beautiful thread to the absolute, to watch that pattern. All of these things are what I mean by paying attention. Can always connect more directly. I remember at one of my very first intensive meditation retreats. I think maybe it was the second one. I did a walking meditation with somebody because they were offering it. And I had just never done anything like that before. They call this beginner's luck in meditation, where, you do a practice for the first time and something happens and then it never happens again. But it's, we know why. It's because you don't have ideas about what might happen. I remember walking with her and just doing the instructions, feeling my feet very carefully, very clearly, and then suddenly seeing ants on the ground and not thinking about ants, but feeling that complete moment with no thought and connection and awe at these creatures. I know immediately in that moment I was crying. There was transcendence, there was that incredible moment of being present, but then there was this like sadness or desperation at the same time, because in that not even a heartbeat of the next moment, realizing I've never been present a moment in my life. I've been missing this. There's so much more to being present, and I don't want you to miss it. This is one of the many reasons why I love Rinzai practice, that a few of us here are Rinzai practitioners, and it's a hard practice, but one of the things I love about it, well, maybe the only thing I love about it, is the outcome, because it's all about paying attention. We're not to move while we sit. We're not to make a sound with our breath. If you have a bug or a runny nose, you may as well be made of marble. And when we have our meals, it's quite complicated. It's like, we've been reading the sutras in the morning, like if the sutra was a lot faster and a lot longer, that's kind of how the meals are. And if you begin to have a thought, you make a mistake, and everybody sees it. And it's a beautiful practice, because really in our ordinary lives, our everyday lives, we're just not watching that carefully for things. It doesn't matter that much. We can toss our shoes off when we walk in the door, and nobody's going to inspect your room and, see how neatly your clothes are folded up. And when when we subject ourselves on purpose to a practice where everything has a form, it's this incredible gift to have to see how many things we miss, and to see exactly when we're not paying attention. And these, without having to do a severe practice, just knowing that those kinds of concepts make sense. You can take those kinds of ideas into your life and realize, if I don't know what I did 5 minutes ago, where was my mind? And maybe look, where was my mind? And then maybe next time, connect when you pick up your toothbrush, or whatever the thing is. This is what I mean by paying attention. Oh, yeah. And speaking of following threads, as we've been talking about, I saw such a sweet one yesterday morning after we did the chanting. Izzy, my little orange cat, was sitting here, and we had shadows of the sunrise coming in, and she was staring at them on the bricks, and you know how cats are, because they don't like look down like this, they're like bonk. So she has her, her head like down looking at the shadows and her ears pointing out. And it was so sweet, and I could tell looking at her like she doesn't know that there's nothing there, that it's light and shadows. And that's why cats like laser pointers, right? And I was just like watching her and, reflecting on how, we have this opportunity to cultivate discernment. We don't have to stay so confused and in delusion about whether my ideas are real, whether my stories about other people or the future or the past have any bearing on what's going on right now. Those are all shadows. You have an opportunity as a meditator to be very clear on the difference between a shadow and a brick. So follow these threads. We have tonight, we have tomorrow. In these next several hours, in the hours tonight and the hours tomorrow before we break silence, you have this opportunity to build momentum that will carry into your life once you leave here. And yes, you can use discernment too about which things you follow. It's like, yeah, I've said everything is a thread, but it's not like you have to grab everything in the world that occurs to you, every single piece of stimuli that passes by, but you will notice already and become more and more sensitized to something that grabs you differently, something that you feel like, I'm moved, I'm irritated, I got a breath, there's a sense of relief. These are the cues that there's something to that, to pause, to attend to notice what that moment, what message that moment has for you, because it does, or you wouldn't have noticed it. Nisargadatta has something nice to say about continuing to try. 448. Somebody said to him, I'm sure this feels familiar to anybody who's been practicing a little while, I have tried many times and failed. He said, try again. If you keep on trying, something may happen. But if you don't, you're stuck. You may know all the right words, quote the scriptures, be brilliant in your discussions, and yet remain a bag of bones. Or you may be inconspicuous and humble, an insignificant person altogether, yet glowing with loving kindness and deep wisdom. During the heart practices this week, I introduced this idea of 3 baskets types of practices, things that focus on concentration, insight, and heart opening. And these things, the value of them, they can be complex, they can get dicey to talk about in big groups or decipher by ourselves, because they are easily and regularly misunderstood. So tranquility and heart practices in particular, they are traditionally cultivated for both the exoteric and esoteric reasons, because they're good for people immediately. This is why people in the Western world now are so enamored with mindfulness and practice in general, because they get these immediate benefits. I feel better, I'm calmer, my focus is a little better, I'm sleeping better. Concentration is good for that. Concentration begets tranquility. And the heart practices are calming and soothing and create pleasant emotional states. This whole continuum is available all the way, through to very profound insights. But it's just important to know this so that you take care not to stop at the exoteric if you have this longing, if you have that longing for, I feel like there's more. Because yes, then also traditionally the whole reason for the concentration practices and the heart practices is to till the soil for insight. Because it makes a person open, pliable, available. So as far as insights go, people will often, as soon as you start meditating, tend to have psychological insights. It's really fun and wonderful, and I, still get them all the time, as probably we all do. You can, just be sitting there supposedly watching your breath or whatever you're doing and like, aha, I know what I'm going to do about that situation. Those things come up and they're wonderful. They fully formed insights about life. And then they come differently at some point. The nature of knowing the Dharma deeply. And by Dharma, we simply mean the nature of things. So when this clarifies, this results in that kind of person that people see and admire as straightforward and peaceful and effective, like the monks who walked to Washington. And I wanted to give you a little word on what to watch out for, watching out for attachments to special states, because those also very frequently come once somebody decides that practice is fun or interesting or promising or whatever it is. There will be times when really exciting stuff happens in your mind. It's, like drug-free drugs without like a bad effect afterwards. But please remember that that's not the point. It's just sparks. It's things that fly off as we're doing the practice. They're not supposed to stay. They're supposed to pass. We tend to get less of them, fewer of them as we continue. And chasing those can lead to a lot of misery. And we've known a lot of people who've made kind of a meditation career out of chasing special states. It's no fun. And, take care when you're reading and listening. There's so much more to listen to now. I think, all of us are of a certain age when we remember that everything used to just be books. Now there are lots and lots of videos and podcasts, and we're a connected world. And it's wonderful in many ways, and it's very tricky in a lot of ways. The Dharma is not a place where you want to look for a teacher who has a lot of charisma. It's not something that if the person makes you feel like everything is going to be perfect in their presence, it's like those are red flags. And maybe everyone's aware, but if they're not, spiritual communities, not just the church that's really infamous for this now, but spiritual communities have a very high prevalence of problematic leaders. Maybe there's an attraction to that position because of a sense of power and desperate people, or people with longing, wanting support. So, please be careful. A teacher that you can trust is probably going to seem very ordinary. That would be my advice. And for our own, practice, there will be lots of times when things are going well, and I I love all the teachers whose books I've been quoting. Jean Klein was one of them. He calls all of these things sweets for the ego. So we watch out for getting more ornaments. So I quoted Ursula on ornaments last night, like, oh, I did that. And then, we're building up the very thing we want to break down. So practice at its heart is humbling and refining. It's drawing you to be the best of yourself. And we don't need to judge or decide what that is in advance. We don't have to, figure it out and then go for that. In fact, that probably delays the progress by having these ideas, because there's always something unknown. But you can't lose by paying attention and intending to be humble. And then this trust grows over time as you continue to see good results. That's my experience, is, a lot less regret, a lot more skillful action, on much deeper levels than I could have imagined. It reminds me of this wonderful person I recently came across. I think I would like to call her a Jewish mystic, although she wasn't called that in the stuff I read. But this person, Eddie Hillesum, she was a Dutch spiritual giant, and she was finding herself in spiritual practices and expanding beyond her original tradition into, anything that would be offered to her, and found herself, in the 1930s and early 40s, volunteering to help the Jews who were being persecuted in Amsterdam, and kept herself in harm's way when people tried to get her to go into hiding, and she refused. Just like I said last night about you don't have to walk through the snow to Washington, D.C., probably none of us also, no matter how enlightened you become, will ever be called to be a martyr. But I do admire so much that this young woman in her 20s was so clear that she knew where she needed to be, and she had no fear of dying. And she did die, and her whole family did. She was deported and sent to Auschwitz and was killed there. She left behind some beautiful words, including, "I don't want to be anything special. I only want to try to be true to that in me which seeks to fulfill its promise." That's Eddie Hillesum. So something I think I haven't mentioned yet that I should for anybody who's new to practice is the 3 jewels. This is a core teaching of Buddhism, meaning really like the cornerstones of practice. The cornerstones of practice being the teacher, the teachings, and the community, that staying close to these things. And this is what they mean when they say go for refuge, take refuge. Take refuge in the 3 jewels. It means, and this is what I meant earlier when I said noble company meaning your meditation community, the people who care about you, who care about your practice, that you can talk about practice with, and they're not going to look at you like, well, aren't you really full of yourself today? But they know that you're sincere, and it's okay to talk about it. This is going for refuge to the 3 jewels. The teacher just meaning anyone who is sharing the Dharma with you. And again, something that speaks to your heart. This is not if you're getting excited, if you want to learn a lot, if it's all in your head, that's not it. The community is these people, the people in this room, other people you may know who are on a similar path, which doesn't mean everybody you like, everybody who's nice, everybody that's in your family, those people can be close to you too, but you do need to have people in your life to make the most of your practice who are actually practicing, who are people who understand why you meditate. And the Dharma, of course, again, is just the nature of things. It's not some belief system, some dogma that you need to memorize and have allegiance to. It's what you can see with your own eyes. It's what you see more and more clearly the more you practice. And that's all it is just how things are. And the clearer they are, the more obvious it is that you know the Dharma. So the teachings that you may already know from any religious upbringing or experience that you've had, any tradition uses, whatever words are familiar to that audience, so that it's, in Buddhism they call it skillful means, just meet people where they are so that things will be familiar. This can help make it more accessible. I do the best I can to do that too. Everything I want to do is to make practice accessible. And they all are talking about the same thing. Especially in the mystical traditions, once we get into Christian and Jewish and Islamic mysticism and Buddhism, all these different words are talking about the same thing. The techniques that we use for focus, whether those are prayers, mantras, sutras, silent practices. I was thinking of Ayakima, the great German teacher. She was only 20th century, a modern teacher. She was famous for saying, we all have the same suffering. We all have the same dukkha. And we also all have the same opportunity to be free. So in that vein, everything being the same, I'd like to end with this famous passage. And I've substituted the word love for Dharma, and maybe you'll recognize it. The Dharma is patient. The Dharma is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. The Dharma does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. The Dharma never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears.